it's very difficult to sort it all out and explain
Yeah.
exactly what's going on. What did Trump say about Project 2025?
He said he didn't know anything about it.
Yeah. And in his first week, he has done everything in his power in very specific ways to implement Project 2025, one of the most pernicious aspects of the executive order following the playbook of Project 2025 are executive orders that harm people's health and seriously risk their lives. This is not exaggeration. This is directly a result of the initiatives that Trump has already put into effect. Let's turn to one of the least known, least commented upon orders from Donald Trump that directly threatens the lives of people. Do you remember George W. Bush, Sam? You were alive enough probably to remember him.
I do, yes.
Was he a radical liberal?
No.
No, he was, maybe the most conservative president. Certainly, he and Reagan were the most conservative presidents elected since the 1920s. And maybe Bush was even more conservative than Ronald Reagan.
Right.
But the most acclaimed thing across the board, regardless of ideology, that affects liberals, conservative, moderates, Republicans, Democrats, independents. What was that program, Sam?
I'm not sure.
The AIDS program, the AIDS relief program, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, known as PEPFAR, PEPFAR. It was to provide assistance for HIV prevention and treatment to the less developed world with a particular focus on Africa. And according to independent analysts, over time, about a 20-year period, it has saved, how many lives? 25 million lives that would otherwise have been lost to HIV infection, including 5.5 million children. Out of the blue, with no warning, Donald Trump suspended the PEPFAR program. People could not get their medicines. And you know what happens when people's medicines are interrupted, Sam?
No.
Two things. One, the treatment is undermined, so they're more likely to get infections, more likely to get sick and die, more likely to pass it on to others, more likely for pregnant women to pass it on to their kids. And when you interrupt medical treatment, according to the authorities, not me, it promotes resistance strains of the pathogen, which could spread beyond Africa to anywhere in the world. Experts have indicated that if this program is permanently terminated, like they seem to want to do, in Africa alone, it could cost 10 million or more lives over the next decade. And if it spreads, across the world, who knows how many additional lives could be lost and how much suffering will take place. Now, everything that comes out of the Trump is so chaotic. It's not at all clear, what aspects of the program are still suspended and what aspects of the program will be continued. Plus, they clearly want to end this program. You know why? Because they think it promotes homosexuality, lesbianism, transgender, all these horrible things that they claim to be against. And for some twisted logic, they also think it promotes abortion. Like other programs that they're trying to terminate, it clashes with their ideology. This is unbelievably cruel. It directly threatens the lives of so many people, not just in Africa, but potentially across the world. Second way in which they threaten people's health and lives is the suspension of federal grant and aid programs, with the exception, apparently, of aid to individuals and Social Security, Medicare, and food stamps. Now, it is unclear whether it applies to Medicaid, life-saving health care, not for a few million, but for tens of millions of Americans. And again, it's unclear what the situation is coming out of the Trump administration. They've recently said, well, Medicaid is exempt, but the states report that they don't have access to the portals for federal funds. And so, the future of that program is in jeopardy. But there are lots of other ways in which this freeze directly affects people's health and lives. It means we're not going to have, at least in its duration, grants and programs for medical research into life-saving treatments for afflictions like Parkinson's disease or Alzheimer's or cancer or strokes. That is all being interrupted. And on top of that, they issued an order saying there can't even be any health communications to the American people from federal health agencies. So if you're threatened in your community by some health emergency, you're not going to know about it. This suspension affects medical care for veterans, including veterans suicide prevention programs. It affects the Meals on Wheels. Do you know what that is, Sam?
Some sort of meal delivery service?
For who?
Low
For
income.
old people who need
old
it
people.
and depend upon it,
Right.
as well as other meal delivery programs. It might affect the student lunch programs, in schools for needy kids who absolutely depend upon it. He is putting in jeopardy in so many ways the health and lives of the American people. I believe what he's doing is illegal, that he cannot refuse to spend money appropriated by Congress. Under the Constitution, it's the Congress, not the president, who has the authority to appropriate money. Who was the previous president who thought he had the power to decide what to spend and what not to spend?
Reagan.
Nope.
Oh.
Or Reagan. Worse.
Nixon.
Nixon was part of the Watergate scandal. This was considered scandalous. This was turning the president into a monarch. And now that discredited doctrine has been revived again in a way that directly threatens the health and safety. Also grants to, we love the police. Well, grants to police for public safety, to fire responders who directly, whose actions save the lives of the American people, are also suspended here. I guarantee what will never be suspended would be the special tax breaks, the subsidies, the policies that benefit whom, Sam?
The rich.
The rich. The rich are going to get richer. All right, next, pulling out of the World Health Organization. This is part of Trump's phony America first. Well, America benefits from these international arrangements like NATO, like the Paris Accords, like the World Health Organization. And if we have another pandemic, and there's a fair likelihood we will, pulling out of the World Health Organization is just going to make it more difficult to combat the pandemic, because these pandemics are worldwide. They're not limited just to the United States. And, an America first approach, as we saw in the deep failures for Trump to deal with COVID-19. Next thing I want to talk about is the suspension of the program designed to mitigate the effects of environmental pollution and degradation on poor and minority communities. Does Donald Trump or Elon Musk have to worry about environmental degradation directly affecting them?
No.
Of course not. It's always the marginal poor people who bear the brunt of environmental degradation and pollution. A prime example is the so-called Cancer Alley in southwest Louisiana, a stretch of about 85 miles, primarily impacting minority communities, Black communities, with a huge number of petrochemical plants there, which directly have impacted the health of the residents of those communities. And now, federal programs to mitigate that are eliminated. And of course, this isn't a direct effect like some of these others, But we have to mention the elimination of any program to deal with climate change. In fact, they've erased climate change. Climate change and abortion are not words that are going to be used by anyone in the federal government under Trump. And they're going to make it much worse by their program of extractive industries and burning fossil fuels. This is not a projection. This is not an estimate. It's here. You've experienced it, Sam, right? Just the last few weeks.
Yes, here in California with the wildfires.
And it threatens people's health and lives, and it's going to be a lot worse under 4 years of Donald Trump. Now, we know a federal judge, right, has temporarily paused this freeze, just as a federal judge temporarily paused Trump's executive order on so-called birthright citizenship. Basically following the law. Congress sets the priorities. Donald Trump has Republicans in control of both houses of Congress. If he wants to change the direction of federal programs, what constitutionally should he be doing?
I don't know.
Going to Congress and getting Congress to change the appropriations. The power of the purse, under the Constitution is lodged in Congress, not in the presidency. But Donald Trump does not recognize this. One of the important motivations is his belief in the unitary executive. He has, again, been absolutely clear on this. Brazen, open. As president, I can do anything I want. Who was the last president to essentially say that, Sam?
Nixon.
Nixon again. This seems to be a model. Nixon provoked widespread outrage when he said, if the president does it, it can't be illegal.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
By definition.
Exactly.
We don't get anymore, unfortunately, this same kind of across-the-board bipartisan outrage. But basically, Trump is doing this in part to show everyone I can do anything I want, and I'm going to do it. Go ahead and sue me. Maybe 3 years down the road, you'll stop it. But in the meantime, everything I've done is going to go through.